All right, we are back again with chapter 3, and we are going to be reading about Wu Zhao, City of Foreigners. In the year 636 CE, 638 CE, an imperial carriage hurried through the countryside on its way to Chang'an, the capital city of China. The carriage rocked and swayed as it went. In the back of the carriage sat a 13-year-old girl named Wu Zhao, and a foreigner is a person who comes from another country. The young girl was going to live in the imperial palace. The emperor at the time, Taizong of the Tang Dynasty, and an imperial is relating to an emperor or empress of an empire. Can you imagine how Wu Zhao must have felt? She had probably never been away from her home or her family before. However, Wu's mother had become a widow and had decided that her daughter would be better off living in the palace. So this is a picture of Wu Zhao. Wu Zhao's new life. In the back of the carriage, young Wu Zhao must have been excited and scared about her new life. The roads became crowded as they approached the city of Chang'an, the largest and grandest city in the entire world at the time. Merchants carrying luxury goods from the Silk Road filled the streets leading to the capital. The carriage came to a high wall. It prepared to pass through one of the 4 great gates that led to the city. Wu Zhao saw amazing things. Roughly 1 million people lived in Chang'an. Many of them were foreigners: Korean, Japanese, Arabs, Persians, Turks, Indians, and even Africans. Wu Zhao had never seen so many different kinds of people. They looked strange to her. They spoke languages she could not understand. Everyone on the streets, even the Chinese themselves, dressed like foreigners. Women wore tightly fitted dresses that followed the fashions of Persia. Rich Chinese men wore hats made of leopard skin. The music that rose up in the streets was unlike anything she had ever heard. In the 2 great city marketplaces, merchants sold exotic goods, foods, plants, perfumes, medicines, fabric, and jewels from foreign lands. As her carriage drove through the streets, Wu Zhao saw many monasteries, temples, and shrines for the Buddhist religion that had come to China from India. She saw houses topped with yellow roofs that were curved to guard against evil spirits, which were believed to only move in straight paths. So a shrine is a place considered holy because it is associated with a religious person or saint, and Buddhist religion is also called Buddhism. It's a religion originating in India that is based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. So what were some of the things Wu Zhao saw as her carriage drove through the city of Chang'an? So what were some of the things that she noticed as the carriage was going through the city? So one of the things that she noticed the most was the amount of different types of people. So not only were there tons of people, there were just other kinds of people that she had never seen before. So there were people that were immigrants from Korea, Japan, Persia, Turkey, India, Arabia, and other places. They were just new people to her. She also saw people dressed in the latest fashions, and a lot of the marketplaces sold newly imported luxury goods, so things that were very expensive that she had probably never seen before where she lived before. She also noticed that there were many religious buildings. All right, let's read about the imperial city. Wu Zhao's carriage went up the street of the Red Bird, a very wide street that stretched 450 feet from one side to the other. At the end of the street lay the walled imperial city. The emperor lived and worked within these walls, and only certain people could enter the special city within a city. All others were forbidden to do so. Even touching the wall was a serious crime. If you dared to put your hand on the wall, you could be hit 70 times with a rod. The guards at the wall allowed Wu Zhao's carriage to pass through the gate. They could tell immediately that the carriage belonged to the emperor because it was painted a brilliant red, the same color as the emperor's court. Inside the official court, seated on his throne, Emperor Taizong issued commands that affected a large portion of Asia. He ruled over a vast empire that included 60 million people. Thousands of government officials scurried about the huge rooms with marble floors, carrying out his orders and meeting his every desire. But Wu Zhao went to an even more secret part of the imperial city, the place where Taizong lived. Only the emperor and members of his household could enter what was called the palace city. The emperor was the only grown man allowed inside the palace city. Even the emperor's sons had to leave when they grew up. Life in the palace city. The emperor had one wife, but many female companions, all of whom lived in the palace city. Wu Zhao was destined to be a companion. This would be her new home. She had no idea what to expect. Wu Zhao spent her days studying music and literature and learning to write beautifully. She dressed in gorgeous silk robes and precious jewels. She and the other women in the palace arranged and rearranged their hair and applied makeup. At that time, fashionable women painted eyebrows on their faces. The eyebrows were drawn in different ways to create different moods. One style was named Distant Mountains, and the other was called Sorrow Brows. Sorrow Brows was Wu Zhao's style. The emperor's wife and his companions walked in the gardens and played games together, including the exciting game of polo, a popular game on horseback that had recently come to China from Persia. While riding at high speed, polo players had to hit a ball with a long stick or mallet. Though the female companions enjoyed the games and luxuries of the palace city, their lives were not free from worry. If any one of the women displeased the emperor, she could lose her privileges or even be sent away from the palace forever. In 649 CE, Emperor Taizong died, and according to tradition, Wu Zhao and the other women in the palace had to shave their heads and move to a Buddhist temple. They would have to live there as nuns for the rest of their lives. Wu Zhao did not want to leave the luxury of the palace. She swore she could find some way to return. Wu Zhao had already caught the attention of Emperor Taizong's son, Gaozong. A year after Taizong's death, Gaozong, now the new emperor, commanded that Wu Zhao be returned to the palace. When she returned, Wu Zhao grew out her hair back and never again left the imperial court. So why did the palace guards know to let Wu Zhao's carriage continue past the walls through the gate to the imperial city? So we know that only certain people were allowed in the imperial city. But how did those guards know that her carriage was to be allowed through? So the emperor at that time, Taizong, the color of his court was red, and since the carriage was painted red, they knew it came from the emperor. What was life like for women like Wu Zhao living in the imperial palace? So what was their life like if they were allowed to live inside the imperial palace? So the women who lived inside the imperial palace lived a life of luxury. They were able to spend their days applying makeup. They were able to watch sports, but their life wasn't easy, however, because if they displeased the emperor, they made him unhappy, they would be removed from the city and to live wherever they could find a place. What happened to women in the imperial palace after the Emperor Taizong died? So when he died, what happened to them? So they were supposed to have shaved their heads and lived the rest of their days or their life as a Buddhist nun. However, Wu Zhao didn't want to live her rest of her life as a nun. So how did she get out of living her life as a nun? Emperor Taizong's son, Gaozong, ended up kind of liking her. So since he liked her, he ordered, once his father died, that she be returned to the palace. So our next title we're going to read is Wu Zhao Turns Ruthless. Once Wu Zhao returned to the palace city, she began to better understand how to survive there. Survival for Wu Zhao meant defeating her enemies, and that is what she set out to do. She cleverly got rid of many of the people who did not favor her, including the emperor's wife and his favorite companions. She secretly killed Gao Zhang's infant daughter and then tricked him into believing that his wife, the empress, had done it. She then became Gao Zhang's favorite companion. Later, she became his wife and empress of China. Empress Wu grew very powerful. She even attended government meetings with Gao Zhang, which as a woman had no right to do in China. Many at court feared her, but they could say nothing. The empress sat behind a screen and whispered to the emperor what he should do. An ancient Chinese historian described how she decided everything, even matters of life and death, while the emperor sat with folded hands. After Gao Zhang died, one of their sons and then another took over as emperor, but the real power belonged to Empress Wu. Superstitious and nervous about enemies, Empress Wu planted spies everywhere, but the ghosts of her murdered rivals haunted her. In time, she could no longer stand living in the palace in Chang'an, so she moved the capital to a new location. Empress Wu was all-powerful. She had everything except the official title of emperor, but she wanted that too. In 690 CE, a flock of bright red birds flew through the room that held the emperor's throne. A phoenix, a bird very special to the empress, was also rumored to have flown over the palace. To the empress, it was clear. Heaven had sent the birds to show that she could be the official ruler of China. She made her son resign. Wu Zhao declared herself the holy and divine emperor, and the founder of a brand new dynasty. For the next 15 years, Wu Zhao ruled as emperor, the first and only time a woman would do so in Chinese history. And resign means to step down from or leave a job. The woman emperor. Emperor Wu had to overcome the fact that she was a woman in what was traditionally a man's world. She worked hard and became a successful emperor. She ran the empire very skillfully, and during her rule, China prospered. Wu Zhao believed very deeply in Buddhism. She had many temples built, and she ordered the creation of enormous rock sculptures. Caves were hollowed out of rock walls. Inside, artists carved giant statues of Buddha from stone. Some of the large cave figures rise as high as 15-story building. And Buddha was the name given to Siddhartha Gautama, which is the founder of Buddhism. So this is what one of those cave sculptures looked like. At 80 years of age, Emperor Wu grew weak and sick. Some of her old enemies saw a chance to get rid of her at last. They killed her closest advisors and put Wu Zhao under house arrest. She died later that year, and the Tang Dynasty once again took control in China. So that's all we have to read for today. Make sure you answer the questions attached to this chapter, and I hope you have a great day, and we'll be back again next week with Chapter 4. Bye.